Well, I never thought I would be able to do this, but here we are, and here I am making this video. So, as you would have guessed by now, but if you haven't heard the news already, I'll give you a little bit of a brief detail on what's happening. So at the time of this recording, the 26th of April 2024, there have been some news reports going on that 2 Titanic items are going to be on sale. And one of them is a very important item because it was part of a set that separated from this musical instrument 11 years ago during an auction, and since the other item is going to be on sale tomorrow, I think it's about time we need to explain why this has to be reunited with a particular item that is currently on display at the Titanic Belfast Museum. And that, of course, I'm referring to that the item that's going to be on sale tomorrow is the violin case of the Titanic victim and musician Wallace Henry Hartley, who tragically died on April the 15th, 1912, and his violin is currently being displayed at the Titanic Belfast Museum. But before I get into full detail on what is going to possibly happen, I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory of the violin and the case itself and what happened to it afterwards. The story of Hartley's violin began in Germany when it was made in 1880. There is no record of it until 1910, when it was thought that the rosewood musical instrument was purchased by Wallace Hartley's fiancée, Maria Robinson. Robinson bought the violin as an engagement gift for her husband-to-be. It is believed that Robinson bought it for £40, and she included an inscription on the tailpiece, which read, "For Wallace, on the occasion of our engagement, from Maria." At the time of Robinson's gift to him, Hartley was playing as a musician in an orchestra, cafes, hotels, restaurants, and in institutions in Lancashire where he lived. He also played on ships including the RMS Lusitania and the Mauretania. By the time he was transferred to the Titanic and became the band leader, he and Robinson were arranging plans for their upcoming wedding, and the lovers had planned to wed upon Hartley's return in June 1912. On the night of April the 14th, the Titanic struck an iceberg. In the early morning of the 15th, Hartley went up on D-deck before playing on top of the grand staircase, and it was later confirmed that Hartley was the one responsible for gathering the musicians together to try and play to keep the passengers calm after Captain Smith informed him and the other musicians the news of the incident. And during the night they had played a variety of music, including Alexander's ragtime band and the infamous song "Nearer My God to Thee." Tragically, Hartley died in the disaster, and 2 weeks later his body was recovered by the crew of the CS Mackay Bennett before it was returned to England. The violin was returned to the family, but Hartley's father passed it back to Robinson upon its arrival. Robinson kept the bag and the violin until her death in 1939. It was then passed down to her sister, Margaret, before she donated it to the Bridgerton Salvation Army, and then the violin and the bag ended up with an anonymous violin teacher, and it was never seen again until 2006, when the violin and the case were discovered in an attic in the UK. Both the violin and the bag had a series of forensic analysis, and 9 years later it was confirmed by the Gemological Association of Great Britain. It is not clear of the owner's identity, but the owner of the violin and the bag wished to sell it to the specialist auction house called Aldridge & Son, which is located in Wiltshire, England. On the 19th of October 2013, the violin was sold for £1.1 million, which became a world record as the most expensive Titanic memorabilia to be sold to this date. Since the auction, the violin had been on display in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, and back in Hartley's hometown, where it was displayed at the Dewsbury Town Hall. In 2013, the violin was handed over to the Titanic Belfast Museum in Ireland, and according to a replied comment on their Instagram account, the museum stated that the violin will be displayed for 5 years. Despite being in the water for all this time, the bag must have survived as the case was made of English coach hide. And it is believed that during the sinking, the long straps of the bag would have been used by Wallace Hartley to strap the bag to himself as a floating device, and it was served to protect the instrument against the salt seawater. But, as we all know, the water did some permanent damage to the violin, and it is now unplayable. It is believed that when the leather case is going to be put up in auction, it's tipped to sell at £120,000 at auction. So the reason why I wanted to do this video was because that, I don't know about you guys, but for me as a maritime historian who is dedicatedly passionate to the Titanic, I think that it should be reunited with the violin. And if a private collector is going to buy the case, I really hope that it will be reunited with the violin at the Titanic Belfast Museum, because as private collectors go, there is a concern about separating items, because if a private collector is going to keep it for its own private collection, it's never going to be revealed to the public. And for me, as a historian, it will be the most disastrous thing ever known to man. I mean, that's why I'm so passionate about this. And I think it's about time that after being separated for 11 years, they have to be reunited at all costs. The price where it's going to be sold to auction, it's very low budget compared to the violin when it was auctioned in 2013. Whoever buys the case tomorrow, I really hope that it would be sold to a collector who will try to get in touch with the Titanic Belfast Museum to reunite the case and the violin together. And bearing in mind, the violin is currently on loan to the Titanic Belfast Museum until 2028. So, considering with the time limit, it is going to be shorter than you think. And it is going to be a huge concern, a really huge concern. And I really cannot stress this enough. I know I'm blabbering on about this, but I've never felt so determined to get this out on social media, because one, it's about time they're going to be reunited, and two, the history of Wallace Hartley is one of the most important parts of the history of the Titanic. And I've seen the violin myself last year upon my visit to the Titanic Belfast Museum, and it was the only item that emotionally hit me the most. And every time I think of the song Nearer My God to Thee, I always get a little bit sick and a little sad, but though I'm trying to hold back the tears a little bit. Hopefully no tears will flow, but I'm kind of holding them back, and it just makes my spine shiver each time. I consider the violin to be the holy grail of music, because it is such an important piece, not just in the story but anywhere in the world, and I definitely think now's the time to put this right. If this video goes viral and if someone is listening out there, I really hope that it will be for the greatest good. But until then, thank you so much for listening, even though I'm a bit rambling on a little bit, and fingers crossed that this dream will come true.